Hi, everyone. It's Rev Kymmi. Thank you so much for joining us.
And I'm Dr. G, and this is the start of a new season. So Season 2, Episode 1, King Road Homicides, the Tipster Behind the Scenes. And that is the official name by the Moscow, Idaho Police Department. Many of you may know this story as the Idaho quadruple murders or homicides.
As you guys may not know about me, I am used quite a bit with tipping off law enforcement on many cases. You can go to a few of those on the preceding episodes. But you guys on this one, you have got to wait for this. When I share my tip information, it is shocking. The information God gave me, which came to be true. All facts. How many? 35? 35 facts and points about the suspect, guys.
Yes, and if you've already listened to the Casey and Vicky White case, our podcast on that, and you were surprised at all the key points, the prophetic word that God shared through Rev Kymmi, that she passed along to Sheriff Rick, that's only half of this story. I mean, it's just amazing what you're going to hear God revealed before it became public via the media and so forth.
We just want to say a disclaimer, guys, that this podcast and the other episodes are not about anyone that we talk about, believe it or not. It's about God. It's God-centered. It's about God using miracles, doing miracles and wonders through me and through Lee, Dr. G, on missing person cases, homicide cases, or in any situation. I ministered in hospitals for over 20 years. I saw miracles all the time. So it is a way that we share these stories so that people can be drawn to Him and to believe in Him, that God is real. We are ordained Christian reverends. I have prophetic ministry gifts. I've been in ministry well over 20 years. And I am a litigation and trial paralegal over 30 years in the top law firms of our country here in America, since we have over 30 countries listening. So I do need to say here in the U.S., I'm practicing civil law, and I'm a member of the Beverly Hills Bar Association. I have worked among the most influential attorneys in America, such as Robert Shapiro, Ken Starr, and many more. I've been recognized by the Marquis Who's Who publication board for many years. I've also worked at the courthouse as a paralegal to the family law judges at the Antelope Valley Superior Courthouse. I also was a teacher, teaching law for the William S. Hart School District, their ROP program. And also, if you guys are into movies, you can see a litigation case that I worked on, a movie that's out. It's called Woman in Gold, true story, and I was involved representing the country of Austria. So, Dr. G, do you want to tell them about your background?
Yes, for those listeners joining us for the first time, I am a professor of criminal justice, and of course I teach all the basic, theory courses, criminology, research methods, and so forth. And that will come into play as we discuss the current arrestee later on in his education, as well as your tips. Some of the prophetic word that you shared with law enforcement.
Talking about suspects, we do want to say that the suspect that we are going to talk about is presumed innocent until proven guilty.
Yes, that's right. That's our system of justice. This isn't the former Soviet Union or some communist country or a monarchy where we arrest people and throw them in dungeons for decades. He has the right to due process and the legal process, and part of that is the presumption of innocence. So we're going to focus on, as we discuss this, on the prophetic word that was shared.
Now, before Dr. G talks about his background, I do want to tell you, if anybody, because I only briefly mentioned about my background professionally, you could look me up on LinkedIn. My bio is available. I'm found as Kymmi, Kymmi, Bloomberg, BLOOMBERG.
Oh, and there was one other thing that you should mention too. You're going to be a published author here, probably sometime in the next half year or so, correct?
Yes.
And what is that book going to be about?
It's going to be about my quest for God, and then experiences such as a few of these cases I'll be discussing that hit my lap along my way with my quest and walk with God.
Okay.
The details how God used me, such as this. We're going to discuss the details of how God used me to tip off law enforcement on this case way before anybody knew the information we all know today.
Okay. Well, anyway, I teach all the basic courses in criminal justice, which includes criminological theory. But my focus is on victims for the most part. And I teach forensic victimology, so that's all about postmortem intervals, dead bodies, and the like. I teach forensic photography. I also teach crime mapping and crime analysis. I was a signals intelligence analyst for 10 years. Prior to becoming a professor, I'm also a certified gang specialist and instructor for the National Gang Crime Research Center and executive editor of the Journal of Gang Research. I am an author. I've written a book on case studies in drowning forensics with New York NYPD retired Detective Sergeant Gannon. And I have been consulting with police departments on various aspects of crime mapping, crime analysis, as well as forensics. And Gannon and I and two of his colleagues, also detectives, Duarte and Mike, we were on TV on the Oxygen Channel. We did 6 episodes. It's called The Smiley Face Killers, The Hunt for Justice. And, of course, naturally, we've also been on all kinds of podcasts and
TV shows. You've been a lot on TV shows, right?
Larry King. Good Morning America. Today, Larry King Live. Yeah, Fox, Geraldo, Greta Vance. I mean, the list goes on and on. But Kevin Gannon, Anthony Duarte, and Mike Donovan. But you can see us on TV. I can't remember where they can find that.
You guys
nowadays.
can watch them right now after you're done hearing this episode. You guys can watch them on Prime Video, Amazon's Prime Video.
Yeah, and I'm a little short guy with the vest and the goatee. That is.
And he doesn't look like that anymore, guys. He's lost a lot of weight, and there's no goatee.
Okay, so on with the show, on with the story here. This is such a sad story. Unlike many of our other podcasts and the stories that we've shared, this one doesn't involve children, but it does involve 4 young people cut down in their early 20s, college students in the prime of their life, just getting ready to head out into their careers. So our story starts, I'm not going to go into a big, long, drawn-out timeline. You can go online. There's some really good ones. I think you found one, right, Kymmi?
Yeah.
Yeah, and it starts back with video when they're in the bar and all kinds of stuff. But for the sake of our story, where it starts for us is Sunday, November 13th, 2022, in the city of Moscow, Idaho. This is a small town halfway up the border of Idaho, right next to the state of Washington on the border. It's the home to the campus of the University of Idaho, a very well-respected institution. The city only has about 26,000 people, 11,000 of which are students. So it's pretty small. And the law enforcement there is also small. I mean, it's not like New York or Los Angeles or Chicago where you have a homicide every 6 hours, you know. I'm exaggerating to some extent there, but we'll be realistic here. So at 11:58 a.m., the 911 operator in Moscow received a call of an unresponsive person. So the first responders go flying over there, and they get there at this house. It's a 3-story dwelling. Rather bizarre architecture, the way it's constructed. And they find a bloody scene, an absolute bloody scene. and 4 deceased persons. Those victims were Ethan Chapin, 20-year-old white male, Xana Coronado, 20-year-old white female, Kaylee Gonsalves, 21-year-old white female, and Madison Mogan, 21 white female. They're all from different cities, and some of them knew each other from being in the same sororities, and of course they all lived in the same house. Ethan was visiting that night with his girlfriend on the second floor. And like I said, you can go online. There's all kinds of coverage on this story, and you can read and watch all kinds of videos on what happened, what people think happened, what evidence was out there. And that's part of the story, because law enforcement was being very tight-lipped. So now here we are, nearly 7 weeks later, after the fact, and we're beginning to get a resolution. And as we said, everyone is considered innocent until proven guilty in a court of law by a jury. Okay? And by the evidence, the beyond a reasonable doubt in a criminal case evidence. So here we are. Suspect was arrested on December 30th, 2022, about 5 days ago. His name was Bryan Kohberger, 28, and we'll cover some of his story as it goes along. He's been charged with 4 counts of first-degree murder and 1 count of felony burglary. That means he committed burglary, breaking and entering in a structure without the permission during the commission of another felony. That's all that really means. Entering the residence and so forth. So now, who is involved in this investigation? This is important. Remember I said this is a small town. Very small town. And when you look at the number of personnel involved, they were not prepared for this. They were completely understaffed to take on a challenge like this, much less one homicide before, a mass homicide, 4 people. And so Moscow PD dedicated 4 detectives, 24 patrol officers, and 5 support staff. The FBI got involved with approximately 44 people, 2 of whom were profilers from the Behavioral Analysis Unit 2. And the Idaho State Police, through 20 investigators, their public information officer, as well as their crime lab and all of their forensic science assets at it, and they put 15 uniformed troopers on the streets to help with patrol. So law enforcement really did throw a lot of assets and resources after this. The public came through. I mean, think about this. And of course, as an intel analyst, I know that about a third of what I would get, I never used or just didn't make sense with what was going on, and the rest of the evidence was pretty useful. So it'll be interesting to see once this goes to trial what they got. But they were dealing with, now remember, this is in 7 weeks, over 19,000 tips received, 9,000 through email, 4,500 by phone, over 600 by digital submission. 6,000. It's just crazy the amount of information they were being flooded with. And there was some ridicule in the media by reporters and others who challenged that the law enforcement up there wasn't doing anything, that they were not equipped, that they were understaffed, and that they were undertrained and underexperienced and all kinds of things. But I tell you what, if you go to their website, Moscow Police Department, there is almost a daily, every day, sometimes a couple times, they would release information, updates to the public. They were being as transparent as they could without giving up this investigation. And now we know that they did quite a bit. So hats off to Chief Fry up there and Colonel Wills with the Idaho State Police. He was representing them. He's the director of the program. We also heard a couple times in interviews Scott Green, who's the president of Idaho, University of Idaho. So, before we get into the suspect here, we're going to do this podcast a little bit differently. We're not going to go by timeline because God revealed so many key points about the crime, about the suspect, what he looked like, what he was doing. I mean, this is just phenomenal, this case. I mean, it just blows me away.
Yeah, we have about over 40 points to make, guys, of the tips that God gave me to share with law enforcement.
Yeah, so we're just going to go down through them very quickly. We'll comment on a few of them. We're not going to deal with dates or anything, but I want you all to know right from the get-go. Remember, this happened on November 13th, a Sunday. And when we get to the DNA, we will throw some dates in there. But before we get into these points and the tipster and our comments, how did you find out about this? Because I do remember you told me about this. Was it on TV in the news? Was it on Newsbreak on your phone?
No, it was just online.
Oh.
Like a Google, you know how the news feed just comes up. And I saw it, and for some reason I thought that they had solved it. They had arrested someone. And so, sometimes I feel sorry for the victims, right? I always do things, I communicate with law enforcement for the victim's sake. So, I don't know, I just thought that they had arrested someone. So I ignored it for a few days. And then I kept seeing it in the news feed. I'm like, what the heck? And so by November 22nd, 2022, I wrote Chief James Fry, as well as Wills he's a state police for Idaho, as well as the FBI through the Tipline. All three at once. Every email I sent, it was to the three of them. Mm-hmm. And I'm pretty good at what I do. I'm just going to say it as it is. I've had so many successes under my belt for years on cases that I know the seriousness of me telling a federal agent information, that I'm that adamant that this information's accurate. But I'm also see myself as speaking on behalf of those who cannot speak anymore, the victims. So I'm relaying information to law enforcement, to these three agencies, on behalf of the victims who no longer can speak for themselves.
Yeah, I remember that first week, in fact, that up until about the middle of December. You read the media, I mean, they're pointing fingers at a neighbor, they're pointing fingers at some other guy, and then, I mean, they had ex-boyfriends, they had all, and their names were all so similar, too. They're pointing fingers at all these different people, but nobody's getting arrested. And all they keep saying is, oh, so-and-so was cleared, and the person over here, sometimes they wouldn't even give a name, like the grub truck driver or something like that, was cleared, and this person was cleared, and Hoodie was cleared, and...
Well, I even looked at those suspects, too, myself, you know, and I'm sure that they cleared them, as they said that they had.
Yeah, it was just so crazy. I mean, the way they described the crime scene and teaching forensics, I'm like, wow. And it sounds like there had to have been so much physical forensic evidence in that crime scene that I'm surprised they're not still there collecting specimens.
Well, the information that I gave that you guys will hear on the tips that I'm about to share, that nothing was shared publicly from the police or family members or media or no one. Nobody knew the information that I gave. It was nothing was affirmed yet. So, do you want me to share this now, Dr. G?
Yeah, I'm going to emphasize that point one more time. The information, you can call them tips, key points, whatever you'd like, but these are the elements of the prophetic word that God revealed to Kymmi, that she then passed along to Chief Fry, the FBI, and Colonel Wills with the State Police. This is information that she shared weeks before anybody even started speculating about it on the internet, in the media.
Yeah, November 22nd, 2022, I began writing them.
Yeah, I remember that clearly because I'm a numbers guy. And that just happens to be 1122, which is the same as the address for the homicide,
yeah.
1122
Murder
King
site.
Road. So I'm like, whoa, did you realize that?
And before we proceed on, because I'll forget, that, I believe that he chose the 13th on purpose. I just want to say that for the record.
And I want to drive this point home one more time. It is not important, and we will never know whether or not law enforcement used any of Kim's information from her prophetic word that she shared with them.
And nor do we know that they did not.
Yep, we'll never know whether they did or did not use it as part of their investigation.
However, we shared the details of what I did in my emails.
That is what is important about this whole story. God shared it with Kim, and she shared it with them before any of it became public. And the means by which she shared it, emails to them, puts it on formal record, an official record, that God revealed this information before the media even started talking about it as rumor.
Now, I want to also say that not only was it shared with those 3 law enforcement agencies, but it was also CC'd to my law enforcement reference, who is a major player. He's confidential. He's a major player at a Los Angeles law enforcement agency. One
He's
of the
part of the command staff. We'll just keep it at that.
So he's CC'd on everything as well, as a witness to what I'm saying.
Okay, what we're going to do is I'll have Kymmi tell me what the key point was, or points. In a couple of these, like physical description, can be wrapped up. And then I will simply, if you want to find the sources, all you got to do is go online. There were so many. I've tried to keep track of them, like in a reference or a bibliography, and so has Kymmi. But you can find them for yourself. I will simply tell you whether or not it was affirmed or reaffirmed by the media, or if it wasn't. But let's get on with the show here. What's the first part that we can share?
Well, there's some other things I want to share and be a little different this time.
Yeah.
I'm going to share some details I don't normally share with you guys.
Oh, yeah.
So you have to, number one, realize, just like I did Kristen Smart's case, telling him that she's buried under Ruben Flores' Arroyo Grande house. You could go on my you can see that email. And on my Facebook, it's pinned to my docuseries. And I'm found on Facebook as KYMMI, Bloomberg, BLOOMBERG. Okay, so I want to say that I, not only on Kristen Smart's case, worked it remotely in 2021, but I also worked this case 100% remote, which means from an undisclosed place. I am at a point in my life where I cannot say where I live. Only the police know where I live because of the work that I do on cases. I worked it remotely. I never went to Idaho to work this case, guys. I went into praise and worship, and I'm prophetic. God shows me visions. They're impressions. They're not real visions, and I don't hear voices, and I don't really see things. Okay? I'm mentally sound. I don't think judges would let me work with them at the courthouse. Okay. So it's actually a gift you can find in Acts 2 in the Bible, Holy Bible. Go there and see that women shall prophesy. Okay? It does say that. So that's what I do. I prophesy. So I then am in praise and worship, and I'm looking at the house, and I'm looking at the back door, and I see him enter in through the back slider. And then I see him entering into the room and doing movements that police officers do to clear a room, clear sections of the house on the second floor, section by section, searching it and clearing it. He's looking for anything that's going to be adverse to him, a problem, right? Attack him, what have you, right? And so I believe, from what I saw with prophetic vision, that he opened the door to the bedroom, and that's where the boyfriend and girlfriend were.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that is unfortunately why they were involved and lost their lives, because he was clearing the house section by section before going to the third floor. He knew they were on the third floor. But before proceeding, you would clear your whole section of the floor you just walked in on, right? So I'm watching him do this with my gifts. And I'm like, oh my gosh, he's a cop. Cops do that. But then I knew from what God is showing me, he has rejection issues. That he was dealing with rejection. So I said, you know what? I'll bet you he's a wannabe a cop and he's a security guard. And most likely, because I'm seeing that he knows how to get away with murder, he has forensic information, tactical information. He's probably a security guard, as well as the fact that he's probably a criminal justice student. No kidding, guys. This is an email evidence. Okay?
Yep.
So I am trying to describe. We will go over the points one by one. But I want you to know how my gifts work. This is how I figured out this information, a criminal justice student, and by watching his tactical, movements. So that's why he went then to the third floor. God showed me his target was Kaylee, and he went up there, and unfortunately, they lost their lives. And that is why she had more stabbing wounds and severity to her. He was dealing with rejection issues, which also I was able to figure out he's probably a security guard, and he was, guys, at the high school. And he wanted to be a cop, and he was a criminal justice student.
Yeah.
Absolutely correct.
We'll come back to that. What did you tell them about his physical characteristics?
So I want them to understand, guys, I'm watching. Okay, I'm a seer. I am seeing him do things. I am watching movements. I also see that he acted alone. I'm looking in the house, guys, and there's no one else there. I knew he acted alone. So number one, Mel acted alone. And?
Yeah, there were some folks in the media that said there's no way.
Well, the police didn't even know that he acted alone.
No way that
at first.
One person, especially this guy that they've arrested, and there was another suspect earlier that everybody's pointing fingers at. There's no way he could do that. One person can't overcome four people. But I think if you go check the stories online, you'll find quite a few murderers, and I'm not talking with a gun, because with a gun, naturally, mass homicide, or like the guy in France that drove a truck through a crowd down the street. Yeah, you're going to pick off multiple, dozens of victims all at once, but by hand with a knife or with a garrote or some sort of ligature or something like that, to take four victims at once, that's supposedly, according to the media and others, that's some phenomenal Herculean task. But this guy did it. And if you don't think it's possible, go look at Dennis Rader, BTK. His first killing involved four people all at once in the same house. So acting alone is not impossible.
So at first the police did not know whether or not he acted alone or with others. And I insisted upon to them that he acted alone. Because I saw that he's only in there alone, guys.
And Chief Fry is saying now in the media that he acted alone. Even though his first question upon arrest was, has anybody else been arrested? I think that was a red herring trying to throw him off. What else can you tell us about this? The person you saw, I'm going to say that, not the suspect who was arrested, but the person you saw that God revealed.
With my
what did he look
prophetic
like?
Vision.
What was his demographic, physical
Well, I could see that he's an athletic, slender build. Okay, he's within his BMI. And he is in his 20s to 30s, is what I saw.
Okay.
And he was about 5'10". Now you have to understand, I'm in a complete different state, in the United States. And I'm doing this remotely through prayer and trying to get a feeling. I don't think that was too bad because he's 6 foot.
Yeah, and it's not like he's standing in the doorway at a fast food restaurant next to that colored strip.
Yeah.
So you can say, oh, it was 6
Oh my
foot
gosh.
tall, but he was.
I did pretty good for
suspect was 6 foot tall.
working remotely.
You said 5'10". You said 20s to 30s, the arrested suspect.
Yeah, he's 28.
28.
So that was
you said he's in his BMI. We find out that this young man used to be quite large in high school and then became a vegan, lost an incredible amount of weight. And if you've seen pictures of him and videos, he's pretty fit. There's not a whole lot of fat on this individual. He's probably at the lower end of his BMI. So.
See, this is where problems came in for him. I picked up he was teased and rejected quite a bit.
Yeah,
and being that I saw that he wanted to be a cop, but he wasn't. So therefore, guess what? He's going to be a security guard, most likely. No offense, guys. If you're a security guard, please. I know that retired cops become security guards and stuff like that. It's not my point. I have to do my job here. And BTK himself did the same thing.
Yeah. And what do you say about this guy's hair? What color hair? Was he
I said
blonde,
he
redhead?
had. Well, I said that he had dark brown hair.
Oh, and sure
and he
enough.
has dark brown hair.
Sure enough.
And I said that these are his first murders. That's something that's unaffirmed. We do not know that, but I'm sure that's accurate information.
Okay. Yeah.
I said clearly over and over that Kaylee is the target and that she had a stalker. I said that in so many emails to them, stressing it, that this is a stalker, this is a stalker. Now, we have learned that from the police that they ran GPS on her cell phone, on his cell phone, Bryan's cell phone, and found that he had been stalking him for weeks. Okay, that is a stalker. That is correct information.
Yeah, in fact, we just saw tonight there was a article on the internet that he had been stopped like 3 months before the murders, west of town at an intersection for, what was it, seatbelt or something?
Yeah. He didn't have a seatbelt on.
Yeah, and I don't know how that's going to play into it. As a crime mapper, the first thing I did was put it on the map.
That was in August.
Yeah, and I noticed that it's the major road into town. These two towns are only about 14 miles apart. It's like 8 miles as the crow flies from his house to the site of the murders. But there's no way to get into Moscow if you're taking the most direct route. Come in on 270, and that's one of the first major intersections. So it makes sense that if law enforcement have a cherry patch set up to get people for speeding and obstruction stuff hanging from their mirror, that they would nab him. And I'll bet you he uses that as his excuse. I was headed to the restaurant and you stopped me. So
I personally don't think it's related.
Yeah,
he lives 15-minute drive from there.
But
okay, so the next one is, I was feeling like he did this on purpose for some kind of power and attention. So, and it reminded me how the fireman creates fires and puts them out to be the hero. It was something similar to that. He's doing this to be in control and to have attention and to feel, this just powerful person in control. He's really about control. So I do, God showed me that he brought his own knife and tools. If he did bring tools to break in, he brought his own things. He didn't take anything from the house, is my point. And today they cannot find the knife.
Yeah, that's still missing.
Which God showed me where it is, so I did report it, which you guys will hear soon.
Yeah. Would this be a good point to talk about his education?
If you want to.
Okay. Because, you've already mentioned quite a few things here. Boy, and I'm thinking about all the stuff I've heard in the media. My head's just swimming here now. I really should create an outline, but we don't like doing that for these. One, you're talking about him being in control, and when I think about this, and this goes, there's mens rea, the criminal mind, the state of mind, actus reus, how the act is done, with purpose and so forth, and then modus operandi. But that's usually when you start talking about repeat crimes. But this guy was a criminal justice student most of his life, and folks don't. We one of the things we talk about in class is, do police officers think alike and act alike because we train them that way? And of course, you picked up on some of that, him going room to room. And when you started,
it was more than room to room. It was like a tactical.
Yeah, when
the way cops would come on in.
Yeah,
to make sure a room is clear, a whole floor is clear. That's what he did.
Because I did my master's in criminal justice, and then I studied criminology, the theory part, the criminal mind part, just like he did, actually, for his doctorate.
Yeah.
And, he just started that part of it. But when you were describing it,
he had a mission, and he was going to execute it.
It sounded like the training I got in the infantry for fighting in a building, how to clear rooms. Or like police officers learn when they go through skills to be a police officer, how to clear a room, like with a SWAT team. And that's not your normal training.
Well, at the law firm, I've been involved representing law enforcement deputies, and so I know a lot of the back and secret information, which I'm not going to share here, of their tactics and strategy and things that they do. So this is what I was witnessing in my vision. That's why I'm like, this guy is involved. He knows too much.
You went through a couple of police academies too, didn't you?
Yeah, Santa Monica Police Department, as well as Los Angeles Sheriff's Department, but they were the community academies.
So, anyway, do people with similar interests, are they drawn to this career field, or do they come into it because it just sounds interesting, and then we train them all to think and act the same? That's always been the big question. I personally think it's people with similar interests are drawn to it, and then those skills are refined. But we look at this individual who was just recently arrested as a suspect. 2018, he gets an associate's degree in psychology. 2020, he finishes up at a different university with his bachelor's degree. Then he goes on and wraps up in May with his master's in criminal justice, which is the study of how you do things and how you administer justice and how you arrest people and what is the law and stuff like that. And then he started in the fall of 2022 with criminology, which is the thinking part.
Just so everyone knows, I have more tip information to share.
The thinking part. So now that we know where his mindset is at, what else can you tell us about this guy that you saw, that God revealed to you?
Yeah, like I said, I figured out he was a security guard, in which he was for some time. At the high school, was it?
Mm-hmm.
Pleasantville or something?
Yeah, Pleasant Valley.
Okay. And so he was.
Where his dad was a maintenance worker.
And I also picked up he's actually a very helpful person. But he's helpful for a reason. To be in control. He's all about control, this guy. In that's, he was the security guard. It's helpful. He helped a co-worker in a health emergency situation. He's an assistant to the professor, right? A teaching assistant.
Yeah.
Teaching a class or classes. And I also picked up he's an extrovert and a nice guy. If you were to talk to him, he's extroverted and a nice guy. However, he's blended. It's coupled with a blend of rejection and anger issues, which I think the friends talked about, that he was a bully. He became a bully, right? Mm-hmm. Eventually.
Yeah, he was overweight and bullied because of his weight. And then when he lost all that weight, his classmates said that they didn't recognize him his senior year. He went from being the bullied chubby guy to being the bullying physically fit guy.
Yeah,
very
he was rejected, and people made fun of him, and
making lewd.
He was on the outs with women.
Yeah,
no ladies liked him.
Yeah.
Then I said that he's one no one would ever think to commit these murders. Now we hear that from his parents' testimonies. We hear that from Students are shocked. His students and former friends, etc., neighbors, they're all shocked. I said that he wanted to be a cop. He owns a truck. I kept seeing a truck. Okay? And then I also saw, now he does own a truck. The neighbors there in Pennsylvania said that they remember him driving by in his truck.
I remember that.
Okay?
In his truck,
That's online. You guys can find that. Also, his dad was a maintenance man who drove a truck, most likely, for the school. So I was showing a maintenance truck, which made sense later because he went to his dad's, right? Mm-hmm. It was a tie to his dad's. Then I said he's a criminal justice student at a university nearby. Of course, we all know he is.
Yeah, he was a first-year doctoral student studying criminology at Washington State University in Pullman, just 10 to 12 miles away as the crow flies.
Then I said he lives in an apartment or dorm near the university, in which he did.
Lives in...
he did, not anymore.
University housing over at Pullman.
Yeah. And... can you share what you want to share with Dr. G?
Okay. What's your point number 20 there? You touched on it before.
That he knows how to kill and how to get away with murder and how to leave little forensic evidence behind. Now, that is exactly what I saw when I was watching him go through the house.
Okay.
Okay? Yeah. I'm like, oh my gosh, he's a criminal justice student. He knows forensic stuff.
Now, look at the university. I remember a few years back, we had about 18,000 students on campus, and we were running about 500 in our major, and maybe on a good semester, 80 master's students. Now, think of the proportion out of all that. It's far less now, post-George Floyd days, but there are a lot of majors out there, a lot of jobs out there. And you focused in on this guy being a criminal justice student and that he studied criminology. And I made that point before. The criminal justice is the how to do things, and the criminology is how you think about it in doing it, either from the victim side or the criminal side and so forth. If you want to get into the laws and procedure, that's criminal justice. You want to get into forensics and how to collect it and process it and use it in court to prosecute or to defend, that's criminal justice. Remember, he had an associate's degree in psychology. He had a master's in criminal justice, and he had a doctorate. He was just starting his doctorate in criminology. But it is deeper than that, folks. It is much deeper than that. His professor, when working on his master's, was the one who wrote all these dark books about serial killers and everything, and one included BTK. And you actually have some experience with BTK as well, don't you?
Yes, I do.
And this fella...
And I compared him a lot in the emails to law enforcement, all three law enforcement agencies, to BTK.
Repeatedly.
Because of the fact, repeatedly you will find them. Because of the fact that he was rejected and he liked power and control, and he wanted, this one wanted to be a cop, and instead he was security guard. And I think BTK was similar. He did dog catching or some kind of control. And
yep.
Was he also security? I don't remember. But
yeah, and BTK's first homicide involved a family of 4.
Yeah, he's probably
4 victims in the same building.
Yeah, he studied, no doubt. He studied him
under
now,
her.
Now I know that BTK's daughter is talking online and saying, oh, he studied under, what's her name, Professor or Dr. Roslin?
Yeah, Ramslin.
Okay, Ramslin.
Yeah.
And it's funny because I all along compared him to BTK. Yeah. And that is, I did not know that he studied under BTK, pretty much. He really did. The person,
Yeah.
Dr. Ramslin,
Yeah.
who wrote about him, did research about him. Now, the daughter said about research that he was probably involved, Kohberger. But the thing is that you thought about it because you have research students. And there's no way he had time to do it, guys.
Yeah, I have graduate assistants.
He couldn't have been his
who help
research.
with teaching and stuff like that. And I've also published, and I'm, the executive editor of a journal, so I know it takes time from proposal to publication.
Yeah, and so he didn't have time to do it.
When he was born, when he graduated high school, when he did his associates, he didn't even get to the university where he could have studied under her until 2020. And her book was published, it has a copyright, which means it actually hit the publisher probably in 2015. But the copyright is August 30th, 2016. So the book on BTK was published long before he even got there. But it's no doubt that he read every book that Ramslin wrote. And it was like a roadmap for him, a perfect study guide on how to do it, the owner's manual on how to be a serial killer and a mass murderer and so forth.
Yeah, but like I told the police, by no means did he become, murdering based on the fact that he did his research questions or that he studied BTK or any of that. He was like this before.
Yeah, and another assertion that's out there is somebody made that it's common for criminal justice and criminology students to write to serial killers and the like. And I would say that that's a false statement. I think it's common. When you say common, in my mind, more than 50%. I would say it's common for killers to receive mail from students. But I never wrote a serial killer. And, I got my doctorate and my master's, and I've never written to a serial killer, so...
I can tell you I've written to one. I wrote to BTK in prison 3 times in 2019.
Okay. Did you get a response?
I wrote him 3 times in 2019. I even talked to the woman in charge of reading his mail. Okay. I emailed it to her. I said, do you remember seeing this? Has he written me back? Do you think he's going to write me back? And she said, I don't want to share everything she said. I'm trying to think about, what I want to share. I don't want to share too much because, I feel grateful that she did share information with me. But she said the ones that he does write shocks her because those are the ones she thinks he won't. And then the ones she thinks will, he doesn't. Yeah. So she said she doesn't know. He's actually unpredictable, paranoid.
Huh.
So,
real quickly.
So I wrote BTK because I wanted him to help on a case that I was working on, a 60-minute case. A mother whose case, missing person case, homicide case, was shared on 60 Minutes. She contacted me. She heard about my prophetic gifts and asked for my help to help locate her daughter's body so that she can be recovered and have a proper burial. So I was helping her with it. It's a Colorado case. I don't want to share which case on 60 Minutes. I don't think she would appreciate it. Mm-hmm. And so I wrote him about specific questions relating to that situation.
Okay.
And I never heard from him.
One real quick point. We're talking about students and the similarity between these individuals. Another author I saw, a professor from an East Coast institution, stated that it was extremely rare for killers to study criminal justice. And, of course, all these similarities to BTK. And I'm like, well, in 1979, Dennis Rader, BTK, graduated from Wichita State University with a Bachelor of Science in Administration of Justice. And it is rare, but it's not completely unheard of, because I did find Stephen Griffiths, Gary McGurk, Ted Bundy, of course, Timothy Krejcir. In about an hour, I found them online that they had studied, law or criminal justice or criminology. So it isn't uncommon. So this guy, as far as his interests, and of course he picked the perfect person to go study under, actually, Ramslin. and reading all
Yeah,
her
I mean, that
books,
would be great if...
He is...
That's all he was
and his
doing.
first homicide involved 4 people, just like...
I mean, I studied BTK.
He is...
He's a true creepster, that's for sure.
A lot of parallels that can be drawn there. Anyway, back to this. What else did you tell law enforcement in early December?
I said that he argues. He's not super argumentative, but he argues if he's opposed. With people, he must be in control. It's all about control. And he's cocky and he must win. So I remember one of his students saying that he's really will make sure that you know that he's smart. And the way that he teaches, he explains it in ways that are way more difficult, right? With the words and phrases or whatever, just to prove the fact that he's smart.
Uses language that is much more complex than it needs to be in order for you to know that he knows.
Now, I knew
something like that.
Now, I knew not only that this guy suffers from rejection from circumstances and from women. God showed me women.
Oh, yeah.
He also, from the rejection, you're dealing with a lot of insecurities. And built on top of insecurity foundation, you get this. I don't know if he's narcissistic. It could be. He could be. I'm no expert, so I'm not going to touch on it. But he has a root of insecurities and rejection, and God showed me that.
Yeah, and you saw him say something, too, in reference to Kaylee, right?
Oh, I don't know that I want to share that.
Okay.
But apparently these are words that he also used with some witnesses in a bar.
Yeah.
So it's most likely true. But
yeah, he's
he
been
said,
kicked out of bars for being rude to
what
women.
I believe is, now that Dr. G is putting me in a corner here, what I told police is that Kaylee rejected him at some point. I don't know if it was online, in a bar, someplace in person, what it was. But it was more severe, most likely, than most, because of the reaction of his. But I can't believe you're making me say this.
Oh, you don't have to say the word, no.
But I'll just say, I'll take it out of context of how I did receive it. It's just that...
It was a nasty word.
He just said that how am I going to say that? That girl dog, the word for girl dog...
Yeah.
needs to die.
Yeah.
It was a vengeance. The killing was a vengeance for, I believe, what God showed me is Kaylee rejected him.
Yeah.
And you know what? It was one too many rejections. One too many.
And it wasn't a spur-of-the-moment ad hoc sort of victimization, was it? You repeatedly told them, he's stalking.
Oh, yeah. I repeatedly, over and over, I said, this is a stalker. And that's why I looked at someone else who we were all looking at online. But he was definitely a stalker. And the police found that he was for weeks.
Yeah.
From his GPS on his phone compared to the students.
And that guy, the other one that had everybody was pointing fingers at, he seemed like a pretty good fit, and he lived close and everything, but he wasn't a criminal justice student, was he? He wasn't a security guard. He didn't own a truck. I mean, but the current suspect who has been arrested and just went through extradition and should be back in Idaho now, he fits this.
Oh, to the T. Then I said he has trouble with those in authority. He will argue with professors over grades. He argues with anyone in authority. If he does not get his own way, he must win. Now, we're seeing that also. It's manifesting in the hearing he just had.
Mm-hmm.
He had to be in control. Why did he waive it? Yes, he said because he wanted to see the documents, right, in Idaho, right? Yeah. But the truth is, what's the root of it? He must be in control. You see, if this way he waives it, he takes everyone else, what? Out of control, and he's in it.
Yeah.
Okay? He's all about control. He must win. That's winning, right? He won in court. That's the way he sees it. He loves the women, but experiences rejection by them. He is confident. Well, we learned that's true, right? Students, classmates, they all said he was rejected by women. The bar has testified, right, that he was rejected even in Pennsylvania, right? That he was rejected and kicked out. He's inappropriate with women. I said he is confident and brazen. He is. Very. We even see it in court. He does not have a lot of friends. His friends said that they dissed him, right? Because he became a bully.
One
and they cut him
said
off.
He was spurned by women.
He does not have a lot of friends. His history of rejection that grew into anger. We see that. His friends said that he's experienced so much rejection that he actually has become a bully.
Mm-hmm.
I said he is intelligent. He is intelligent. His psychology professor wrote that. He wrote a reference letter saying that he wishes that he would stay in psychology, but now it's his loss.
That reminds me.
Yeah, that he's brilliant.
You're talking about his knowledge of forensics, as part of the prophetic word.
Yeah.
And that he's a criminal justice student, and of course we know that translates to forensics.
Yes.
And I remember reading just a couple of days ago, one of the officers who was following him for that 4 days in Pennsylvania, didn't he say that?
Oh, before the
even
arrest,
when he went to the giant grocery store, he
with
wore
gloves
gloves
on. Yep.
in the store, picking up stuff and touching everything. Now I realize it's Pennsylvania and it's cold, but who wears their gloves in the store?
Well, he might resemble BTK a little more than we realize.
Yep.
Now, when I talked to the prison, the lady who reads his mail and in charge of him, I don't know to what degree, just reading the mail and the outgoing mail, I don't know. Yeah, she must read the outgoing mail too.
Yeah,
but anyway, she told me he was BTK's paranoid. Now, this one sounds like he is too, doesn't he?
Yeah.
I said, I can sense he can fight and has tactical training from what I was watching.
Yeah.
Now, what did we find out about his training?
Fighting. Back in high school when he was losing all the weight, he took up boxing.
Yep.
And he used that
He's a fighter.
to beat people as a bully as well.
Yep.
And he used to like to start fights, try to fight people.
Yep.
So he does know how to handle himself.
Now, God showed me a little bit more information about the murder that is way too much graphic and information to share with anyone.
Yeah. You did share it with law enforcement.
He showed me what he did in the room during the murders with Kaylee and Maddie. And I there's no way I'm sharing that information.
No. But it's
too awful.
It was shared with law enforcement.
No, I did not share that part.
No? Okay.
If you're hearing law enforcement, contact me and I'll share it with you.
Okay.
Because I'm not going to write them again. If you guys are interested, contact me in hearing that information. Okay, so I shared what occurred inside the house. And I do not believe that he became this person based on his questionnaires, his questioning.
Point 32, what's that say?
I said he went directly to his apartment before returning to the class at the university he was attending.
And that was affirmed.
True.
He
True.
was listed as teaching. He was a teaching assistant, as a grad assistant. And, the tuition reimbursement, that kind of stuff. Listed as teaching 3 courses. And the murder was on November 13th. The semester ended in December. I think it was December 9th or something like that. So that takes a lot of planning, a lot of self-confidence. I think it shows his arrogance. He actually went back to the university, went to the classroom every time, and taught his classes right through to the end of the semester.
Now, some students...
He did not run and hide.
Some students said that he was super tired, like, all the time. But after the murders, he was chatty, and he had a lot more energy. You want to know why I believe so? Because he wasn't stalking them at night anymore. I believe he was up doing that.
And he got his,
At times, not all the time.
got his adrenaline and dopamine fixed too.
Yes. Then, you know what was interesting? God showed me days later that, remember I came in on November 22nd, 2022, right?
Yep.
So I come in a week later, over a week later after the murders. And God shows me all of a sudden in a vision, prophetic vision, that this man, the murderer, is in a different house, a different location. It's a 2-story house and there's a lake nearby, water. I'm like, huh. And I told you that. I'm like, he's somewhere else. I see a 2-story. So we find out later, where did he go? On December 17th or something?
Yeah.
He drove with his dad to where? Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
To his dad's house, a 2-story by the lake, by water, guys.
Yeah, 2-story house. And again, talk about forethought. I've driven across this country and in Europe by myself numerous times. And he had his father come out and meet him at the end of the semester and then drive back to Pennsylvania with him. Why did he do that? Why didn't he just drive home? Was it because he wanted to ensure that he had a witness and an alibi with him to account for his every location between leaving school and getting home? I don't know.
I think it's just to look normal.
I don't know.
Appear to be normal.
We'll see. But it
He's
is
with
interesting.
someone else.
You said he was
alone.
in a 2-story
He doesn't look suspicious.
dwelling, and his parents own a 2-story house.
I think it's to cover because he's in a that white Elantra.
Yeah.
So he's got it right. They're looking probably for one person. So if you got 2 in there, you might throw him off a little. So I think it has to do with that.
Okay.
I believe that he, and this is, everything I'm reading, guys, is in emails from November 22nd, 2022, or soon thereafter. I believe he knows at least one of the girls from university work or local hangout, like a bar or someplace similar, or even online via social media. And this detail was affirmed by Kaylee's dad, Steve, via online news, that he sees a connection with his daughter, Kaylee, and Bryan. There's a direct connection.
And we're waiting to hear what that is. Yeah, and like we said before, keep in mind, the information that we're going over here, these elements of this prophetic word that Kim shared, they all were recorded in emails to law enforcement before the current suspect was even on the radar in the media and anybody was talking about it.
And this is before Kaylee's dad, Steve, came out and told us all that the coroner or the medical examiner said that her wounds were more severe than the rest. Now, way before that, I said Kaylee is the target.
Yeah.
Way before. So I said ultimately murder was birthed from years of rejection. But it's also, he had this fascination with murder. So being a criminal justice student or studying BTK or doing the questionnaires did not birth a murderer. He was this way before. That's why his interest in all of it.
Yeah.
So throughout the emails, I often compared, interestingly, Bryan, like we said before, to BTK, Dennis Radar, who was a security guard but wanted to be a cop. He was dealt with rejection and he was majorly, he still is today, wanting to be in control, said the prison guard that I talked to. Or whatever her title is, I don't know. Again, I mentioned several times that he's a student at a university, a criminal justice student. And I also said that no one can vouch for him when law enforcement catches up with him. He'll have no alibi. Now, that was affirmed detail via Bryan's attorney, who shared the detail online news in Pennsylvania. I remember them saying that. They touched on it. The murder weapon, the knife, that nobody has found, I believe it was thrown into a body of water, which I told law enforcement. I'm sure they can look on the GPS of his cell phone and see whether or not he stopped for just a few seconds, minutes by bodies of water. And if so, you should go look. I've reported that to law enforcement. I'm sure they're looking into it. And I would say that it's most likely, I wasn't sure if it was Pennsylvania or Washington, but hearing that his dad was in his car from Idaho to Pennsylvania, the likelihood is it's in Idaho. But you know what? He's pretty brazen. It could have been in his trunk. You never know. Or in some suitcase, and then throw it in the body of water in Pennsylvania, which would be actually really brilliant, wouldn't it?
Oh, yeah.
Who's going to find it if it is a lake in Pennsylvania? So I think the only way that they're going to be able to find out, possibly, is where did they stop by a body of water? Or him alone in Idaho.
Yeah.
So, what did you want to share next, Dr. G?
Well, let's see here. Should we touch on that?
Yeah, I prophesied what would occur. I said, in due time, investigators will catch up with him, investigate him, find biological evidence that would tie him to these murders. And that's exactly what happened. Investigators found DNA inside the crime scene. They compared the DNA through public...
like Family
like
Tree and
Ancestry.com,
yeah.
Some kind of DNA pool data company, and they were able to find him that way. And then I also prophesied that this would come to pass days or months, not years. And that too was fulfilled.
Yep, 7 weeks.
Yep.
7 weeks is all it took. That's impressive. That is doggone impressive. Given the parameters in this case, that you're dealing with such a wily guy, no doubt he wore gloves at the crime scene. And when you look online, it is quite interesting that, and I double-checked tonight before we started the podcast, you go into December 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th, and the media is still speculating that they even have DNA evidence from the house related to a suspect. Granted, there's, unfortunately, from the description, the victim's blood everywhere. But what did the perpetrator leave behind? Hair, skin cells? Did he or she get cut and leave their own blood behind? And so the media is late as the middle of December is still speculating about DNA. And it's not until right before the arrest of this suspect and after that they're now saying we have DNA, right? And you said way back in November,
they're
going to find DNA evidence to tie the suspect in.
Yeah, what I did was I saw, I don't know if I ever remember reading it online, but or was it something I knew from my gifts? I think it was something I knew from my gifts because they never came out that they had DNA evidence from the house, the murder house, right? So I knew that they did. So that was from my gifts. So I wrote them on December 7th, 2022, and told them to dig into his DNA and to try to compare it, in which they did through the Ancestry.com. Mm-hmm. And I think I said in the email to use the DNA that you found at the house, at the murder scene, and compare it to some DNA. They needed to go to family members and stuff like that, in which they did, the Ancestry.com, right? Mm. Or similar company. Yep. So anyway, that, I'm sure, did not influence them. I'm not in criminal law, I'm in civil. How often do they use this genealogy from families like Ancestry.com? I don't know. But if it wasn't that I influenced him on December 7th, then that also was prophetic information of how it would be solved. Probably. And I didn't realize it.
Yeah, they use paternal and maternal DNA quite often in cases. And CODIS. They use CODIS.
Right. But he didn't have criminal record.
Yeah, it was squeaky
so he's not
clean
going to be in there.
From what we're finding.
Yeah.
Yeah. So all in all,
God did amazing work.
About 40 different characteristics of the suspect and the crime scene. And so not only the individual, but the mens rea and the actus reus.
Everything.
That you described and gave to law enforcement. And
that he had even gone to a different house. 2-story.
we went through the suspects.
It's pretty amazing.
And that one was pretty good, but, didn't have the right education and so forth. And then along comes this current individual. And we must stress that he's innocent until proven guilty in a court of law by a jury of his peers. And so now we wait. We wait and see. And he should be back in Idaho by now. He was extradited today by airplane. And that is a whole interesting thing in and of itself. The FBI took charge of taking him back and transporting him back to Idaho. And
now usually the U.S. Marshal's Office does that.
Typically the U.S. Marshals.
I wonder why the FBI did that.
And transport arrestees and inmates, and they take care of the witness
protection. That's probably the wrong thing to
do. Chase down fugitives.
You know what? That's probably the wrong thing to do. This is the attention he wanted. They probably shouldn't have done that.
I don't know why the FBI did it. It's quite interesting, but but they did, and he should be back home now. So now we have to wait and see if he ever tells us why he did it. That's the curious part. Why did he do it?
And get the offer. I don't think he's going to say why he did it.
Yeah,
I know that a lot of criminals like BTK, he bragged about what he did. This one's not going to be. He denies that he did it. So it's obvious that he's not going to be bragging like BTK.
Yeah. Oh, and like you said, and there's been so many similarities, not only in the tips you were forwarding to law enforcement, but in the media between this current suspect and BTK. BTK started out, as we know, with Barbie dolls, right?
Yeah.
And evolved in his
Well,
interest.
if people don't know, he had to, with Barbie dolls, he bound them up with little ropes, or I don't know what they were, something tiny. And then that wasn't enough.
Yeah.
So he had to go do it.
Evolved to real humans. And this individual, when you look at his studies, he started out in psychology, he went to criminal justice.
And then he did the questionnaire to everyone.
About forensics and evidence and how crimes are committed and the types of crimes and the different weapons that are used and all that kind of stuff.
And it just wasn't good enough anymore. He wasn't getting his fulfillment.
And that satisfied his interest. And then he was involved in a study, and you can find it online, where he started... Clearly a graduate student. He was concerned about Institutional Review Board and protection of human research subjects, and did the consent form and all that kind of stuff, informed consent. And then he starts asking these questions about criminal behavior, but he's more concerned about criminal thinking. What were you thinking when you were preparing for this? What were you thinking when you were doing it?
But
and just like BTK, he evolved from his interest in what's doing it to how is it thought and what's it feel like to experience it myself. And that's where he went.
Yeah, I just don't think the class is...
Maybe, if this is the killer. It fits the pattern of BTK.
With what God showed me, he's always had a fascination with murder. He's always had a fascination with murder. And he was absolutely obsessed with Kaylee. Absolutely, totally stalking.
According to CNN, the individual who was arrested, Bryan Kohberger, has arrived back in Idaho, and he was escorted to Latah County Jail earlier this evening. So he is back. So the probable cause affidavit, the PCA,
it's going to come down any moment
through Freedom of Information Act request that someone may fill out, or they may just release it to the public but the information in there that tells us what evidence they used beyond a reasonable doubt, probable cause to arrest him and have him extradited will be revealed.
I remember that going on to Moscow Police Department's website, if you go on to, I think it was January 4th or 3rd, 2023 press conference, it does have a link of where we can get a copy of that.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yep, that's where you go, guys.
Yeah.
But we want to thank you so much for joining us, and we will talk to you on another episode.
And where can people find you or us to send comments and to find us to listen to this podcast and other podcasts? And what about following us? Should they do that?
Oh, they should definitely click follow on the podcast. As well as you can follow me on Facebook, found as Kymmi, Kymmi, Bloomberg, BLOOMBERG. Some of my emails I'm going to make available in the comments on my docuseries that's pinned to my Facebook. And just, you can go to other episodes of other cases. There's the email evidence as well, that these are true information and emails that have been sent to law enforcement way before resolution or information coming out.
Yeah. Okay.
And share with your friends.
And click follows. Yep.
Yes. And we'll talk to you guys on the next episode.
Yep.
God bless you.
Yep. Bye-bye.